Ladies and gentlemen, if you're ready, it's 6 o'clock, and Wendy says and Chris says it's time to go. So we're going to get started. And on behalf of the First Five, I would like to welcome all of you on this really special evening. And I give everybody so much credit for putting out on what looked like, well, which has turned out to be kind of a lousy day. It's going to be a great day when we're done. I'm Jim Tedford. I'm a retired pediatrician, having worked in San Luis County for 40 plus years. Wonderful private pediatric practice. I am not Luchadone. I am a proud commissioner on First Five, have been for a few years and love that opportunity. I'm also a board member, longtime board member of the San Luis Obispo Medical Education and Research Foundation, SLOMERF, which is a sponsor of the program. So I haven't qualified to be up here right now. So I think most of you know that First Five is one of 58 local, that is, it's a statewide organization, representation in 8 counties. And the primary purpose is work of children in all aspects, excuse my resolving hope, but in all aspects of their development, their health, well-being from ages prenatal to age 5. First Five, as all of you know, reaches out, collaborate, all the different organizations here, and we're very proud of it. I know you are too. In keeping with the goal of this meeting, I point out that this is the second pediatric town hall. We had the first about 4.5, 5 years ago, talked about developmental screening and referral. That was sponsored by the Health Department, Academy of Pediatrics, Chapter 2, and First Five, and was quite successful. In fact, so successful that we're going to do it again soon. And this turns out to be soon, because other things kind of got in the way. Tonight, our intention to talk about mental health issues and the extreme effect that you all know that it's had on our pediatric population. The youngest to the adolescent group, going to tackle that particular topic with vigor, and I hope that you're going to walk out of here more ready to carry on with the treatment of. Before we proceed, I'd like to take a moment to emphasize that word collaboration. There are folks here from the whole variety of child support. And just for the fun of it, and this was Wendy's idea, but I think it's quite fun. We'd like to have a show of hands, get an idea of the variety of folks that are here. So how about pediatricians to begin with? Wow. And what about pediatric staff and other medical providers? Early intervention providers. County public health. There's early childhood educators. and family support and family enrichment. We are so pleased to have you all here. Part of the idea of collaboration is to have gotten to know one another a little bit better. And I hope everybody has had a chance to 2-minute warning. To peruse the tables and learn a little bit more. All right, we have an action-packed agenda. The keynote address is going to be by Dr. Barbara Szilagyi, who we're delighted to have. UCLA person, that's where I trained. She's past president of the Academy of Pediatrics, and I've been a fellow of the Academy for 48 years and experienced 48 different presidents. She's been as good as any. High school. You'll note that there are indexes at your table. If you have questions, write them down, hold them up, we'll collect them and try to answer. I have a couple of thanks to give. Bill's Catering. Bill, thank you very much. Courtyard Marriott. Unity Health, Danica Boyle, that they're providing CME for those of you who wanted it. Finally, before my voice is totally gone, Rotabush, thank you. Last thing on my list, we thank the sponsors. Blomer, you all know who that is now. The County Department of Public Health, the American Academy of Pediatrics, Chapter 2, and finally, Senkel Health. And on that note, Antonius Health and Marina Owen, they're the latest director. Thank you all.
I had not thought this. What a lovely introduction. Thank you so much. I wish to just echo the warm welcome and appreciate all the incredible partners here this evening and the presenters later. The work that we do to convene and educate is really valuable. And as I walked around outside, I learned so much more, even from all of our community partners, the work that they do. So my name is Marina Owen. I'm the CEO of Senkel Health, and we're your local Medi-Cal health plan here in San Luis Obispo County for the underserved Medi-Cal program. And that is in the other category. As we went through sort of the, those that are pediatricians, those that are public health. And so our role really is to support all of what our 15th year in San Luis and 40th in Santa Barbara. So we provide health insurance to 1 in every 5 or 70,000 residents in San Luis at this point, and 42% are children and youth. Of those, 7,000 are children ages 0 to 5, and half of those little ones over half live in North County alone. So the mission of First 5 is so important to allocate funds and advocate for quality programs and services to ensure that every child is healthy and ready to learn in school. And this is really, really important to me. I'm the daughter of a school teacher. That's how I came into this work. And she taught 3rd grade for over 40 years, retired, kept teaching, then retired a second time, kept teaching music program, and then ended up doing reading intervention for those children falling behind. So to our early childhood educators, so much respect for the work you do. And also mother of a bright 8-year-old girl. Tina told me earlier today that I took the crayons. They said crayons are for adults as well, not just but my daughter was in kindergarten when we went to remote learning when the pandemic began, and so many children struggled. My child struggled. I wanted to just emphasize that I think what I heard in the room earlier was so much collaboration. I think it's one of San Luis Obispo County's superpowers. is communities like these. And so as we think about behavioral health, there's just so much need. There's also a lot of opportunity. So as we think about the program today, just that encouragement to think about what we have in our control and in the power of these various partnerships. So with that, look forward to learning about all the wonderful best practices and amazing work. And I'll turn it over to Dr. Abdul Kader and welcome you again. Thank you. Right, it's gonna go down even more. So I'm Dr. Nisha Abdelkader, pediatrician, and I work for the County of San Luis Obispo Health Agency, and I'm one of your second annual pediatric town hall planners, so I'm very happy to be here. It's my great pleasure to do a quick introduction, although Dr. Tedder gave a couple of hints away. And go ahead and add on to help me to introduce you a little more to Dr. Moira Szilagyi, who is, Dr. Tedder said, the immediate past president of the American Academy of Pediatrics. Dr. Szilagyi is a primary care pediatrician. She's an educator and professor of pediatrics at UCLA since 2014, where she is the division chief of developmental and behavioral pediatrics, the Peter Shapiro Term Chair for the Promotion of Child Development and Behavioral Health. She completed her MD, PhD, and pediatric residency at the University of Rochester. During her 30 years in Rochester, she developed a community-based integrated care medical home for children in foster care. She worked in a suburban private practice, precepted residents in continuity clinic, created and led a regional child abuse program, conducted research highlighting vulnerable children, and mentor trainees. Dr. Szilagyi has worked closely with the AAP for 3 decades. In the 1990s, she led a multidisciplinary team at AAP District 2 that developed the first healthcare standards for children in foster care, fostering health, and those are now the national standards. She had served in leadership roles on the AAP's Committee on Early Childhood Task Force on Foster Care and the Council on Foster Care, Adoption, and Kinship Care. She has authored several AAP policy statements, clinical and technical reports, and speaks widely about child welfare, vulnerable children, and childhood trauma and resilience. She's a dedicated advocate. Dr. Szilagyi works closely with the AAP's Washington office on legislation related to equity, diversity, and the care of vulnerable children. She collaborates with mental health and child welfare to integrate evidence-based interventions into pediatric care. She continues to work closely with the AAP and the University of Massachusetts Medical School to develop and implement curricula for pediatricians, trainees, and health systems about trauma and resilience, informed care, and relational health. Dr. Szilagyi wouldn't know this, but I've been following her work for a while, and the first time I was introduced to her was as an audience member at an American Academy of Pediatrics meeting where I went to her talk about care for foster children, because that's an area of interest. And the concept of foster care clinic struck me as something very important. I came back to San Luis Obispo really excited about that topic, and this will probably date this a little bit, how long ago. I talked to our then NCH director, Jan Campbell, and I said, Jan, can we do a foster care clinic? She said, CHC, and CHC provides that need because the children can get the continuity. So we're going to see that the physicians that they saw probably before placement and after. So I was really, really happy to be able to start that discussion and that concept of special healthcare needs of our foster youth. I also attended her online program with Dr. Heather Forkey on trauma and resilience. And so when we started to think about who could come and give a keynote talk on mental health in the context of early childhood, Dr. Szilagyi is the person. Thank you very much and welcome to San Luis Obispo.
Really great to be here. It's called was a fun drive. Okay, my husband, the weather, I did not. And I said, you should right now. Because there's an hour and a half sunny window. I heard you, so ended up leaving on time. I had planned.
While Dr. Szilagyi is getting her talk queued up, I want to remind you all, please do throughout her talk, if you have a question that comes to mind or a comment, please write it down. Put your hand in the air, and Chris and I are going to go around and fun.
Right, thank you. Don't have to shout. So, thank you first of all, Wendy, Nisha, and our other help for inviting me to speak with you tonight. I don't know if this is quite the topic that everybody wants to hear about, but it is the topic you're going to hear about. I will say, what you're doing here tonight is pretty much, it's not the norm for everybody who does early childhood work to gather, put out a great resource table, and then have conversations with each other about the work that you're doing on behalf of families. This is how good change happens in people. This is how we stop working in our own little groups, right? And we start reaching across. I remember so-and-so, they're doing this. I'm just going to get calls if they can help me with this family. And so what you're doing here tonight, it may seem like a social evening. It's really important. So I thank you for doing this. This should be a model across the country. It does not happen in enough places. And I will say nationally, we're learning to do this ourselves. None of my preferred networks are available. So anyway, I would say we all share a common vision, right? There's probably every person in this room went into early childhood because we know how important those first years. This is where a family is formed. This is where a child's brain is. This is where we lay the seeds for the future development. And if we get it wrong early, it's hard to make up the deficits. Cascades happen, and we can positive cascades or cascades. Deficit never completely. And we go to my disclosures. I thought I literally almost have nothing to disclose. That's one of the joys of being a pediatrician who does foster care work. Except we did publish a book, and I did get a small percentage of the royalties for it. So, not very. I also want to say that after there is going to be 3 panels, one on Help Me Grow, one on Early Start, during the first order of childhood, and parent coach. I think that you're all going to learn about the resources that they offer, and I must say you have a lot of resources. So Wendy and Nisha tell me that you're all familiar with adverse childhood experiences and how childhood adversity and trauma biologically embedded with long activation of the body's physiological stress hormone response. And especially when children do not have supportive response goals for their parents. And I just want to frame up a few things so we're all kind of on this. I don't probably want to tell anybody in this room about the importance of early intervention. It's actually a very famous slide. Heckman curve. Heckman's an economist who decided to study early childhood. And he actually, so on the blue curve, you'll see the brain's ability to change in response to experiences is huge in the first 3 to 5 years of life, and then goes down, but it remains pretty malleable, right, through childhood and adolescence, and even into young adulthood, that it all ends. And then the other curve shows how many dollars you have to invest to make change over time. The bang for the buck is in the first 3 years of life. If we can do the first 3 to 5 years of life we have prepared a child very well for their future. They're set up to go to school and learn. They are set up to become competent adults. There's still a long way to go. We know there's still adolescence ahead, but anything can happen. And does. But this is an important curve because the return on the investment is so high. And this is my one slide that covers all of early brain development. I have managed to do a completely superficial overview for you here. So just to remind you, the brain is built very slowly, rapidly, prenatally, and in the first, but otherwise slow. So from the bottom up, it's simple to complex. It is shaped by the interaction of our genetic codes with our environment over time. The experts now call it GET. They're geneticists. They're talking about GET. That's what they mean. Positive outcomes occur when a healthy genetic code is a typical environment. Trauma and adversity hijack this entire process. A traumatized parent, a parent who's ill, substance using, has other problems that, multiple life stresses that are distracting them from their nurturing care. The first 1,000 days, and then again puberty, are the two most rapid periods. Always be puberty, real opportunity. All childhood. But in the first 1,000 days, the brain is making gazillions of new neurons. That's actually a medical term. That migrate to form circuits. Those circuits then form structures, and they talk with each other electrically and chemically. Synapses. There's also a lot of pruning. We're born with way more brain cells than we need, and some of them go away because they're supposed to go. But sometimes if kids don't get what they need when they need it during a sensitive period, structures that are supposed to form in a typical way not form in a typical. Whereas my friend Andy Gardner, who's a primary care pediatrician, who's got a PhD in neuroscience, says, don't use it. So this is something else to be remembered. And then myelination, Andy also says this is like going from dial-up to broadband. It really speeds up transition. That starts happening. And then this cascade concept, that if we build good structures, those good structures amplify development. But if we leave gaps here and there, then the child starts out behind. And the other thing that is that children don't grow up in a vacuum. Families don't live in a vacuum. They live in communities like this one, right? And so they have extended families. But life starts prenatally. And so a healthy mom who has limited stress, who's physically well and mentally well, is a gift. And so part of prenatal care is making sure that women have the supports to be healthy while they are pregnant. Substance exposure, environmental exposure, there's a lot of things that the child comes out into the real world. The most important is their immediate family, and in some communities, their extended family, like some cultures. But they live in neighborhoods with other people, neighborhoods and schools, recreation centers, hopefully libraries, and lots of good things that are supposed to sustain and help our children. What affects families, whether that's a federal policy, whether that's a state policy, whether it's the neighborhood they live in, what affects the family affects the family. So I'm going to talk a lot about resilience. The science, there's actually a whole science of child resilience. It's often somebody else's literature, so as pediatricians certainly they see it. And it's really interesting for me when I first read this work and I discovered Ian Maston, who's an internationally renowned developmental, can actually explain things in a language that I can understand. He defines resilience as a dynamic process of adaptation to or in spite of significant adversities. dynamic, dependent upon the interaction of our genes and our environment, and developmental. And she calls resilience promotion ordinary magic. You guys are all doing ordinary magic. Everyone. We're all magicians. Because for children, the pathways to resilience develop in the give and take of safe, stable, nurturing relationships that are continuous over time. These are their primary attachment. As a kid, you got more than one. Maybe you got 5. That's wonderful. And it also, in the growth that occurs, play, exploration, and exposure to a whole variety of normal activities. We all know in this room that not every child has this kind of right area for. Where I trained in Rochester, New York, we not only had libraries, we had toy libraries. You could go in and borrow toys. It was a wonderful thing. Now you'd have to really clean them, you have to cook them. It was still a wonderful thing for families who could not really. And before the science of resilience came out, the science of resilience started with the scientists looking for the invulnerable trait that resilient people have. It must be in there somewhere. 40 years of research later, they discovered it's not a trait. It evolves. It develops over time. It's something else that grows as we beings. So the acronym THREADS was coined by my dear friend, Heather Forkey, from Rebecca. And these are the 7 personal resiliency factors we expect to see in a resilient human being, and they've been proven by science. And she used the acronym THREADS so we can all remember. Having a thinking and learning brain, sense of hope or optimism or faith, being able to regulate our emotions and behaviors, having a sense of self-efficacy, having a secure attachment to achieving age-appropriate developmental skill net, and having a larger positive. So it turns out that the most important thing any child can ever have in this universe will know what that is. Right? Safe, stable, nurturing character. Stable over time. It is this person or persons who creates a context in which all those resiliency skills. But attachment probably be the first thing on the list that it didn't fit the acronym. Because that is the context in which all of the other resiliency skills develop. It is the context in which the parent-child relationship. It is the context in which secure attachment develops. It is the context in which this brain grows and develops on a typical. As pediatricians, we're actually not taught very much about attachment in training, which is a massive depth, I now believe. We walk into a room, we assess it. We assess the quality of the attachment relationship. Use it. You don't even sometimes realize we're using it. Certainly comment on it. So attachment theory holds that the safe, stable, nurturing caregiver provides vital functions. All out of attachment. They provide protection and safety. A secure base from which that child is going to safely explore the world and world. It's where we all develop our sense of self as we see ourselves reflected back to us, eyes of our curator. We learn about ourselves in relationship. It's the foundation of learning. It's where we achieve, at least in the first several years of our life, of our developmental skills. And it's where we start to develop that sense of self-efficacy that we listen over ourselves, futures, and over our environment. And then these last 2 vital functions, emotional regulation and executive. These take a long time to develop. Now know the brain does not mature until around age 26. And this part matures last. This is where those things in the prefrontal cortex. These skills are built. As soon as a child is born, we start building these skills with them. And they don't fully mature until we're in our mid-20s. I don't believe I know the date when I felt my emotion. Initially, they're provided for us by our caregivers. Model them for us. They do them. They teach them to us. And they layer them on over time as our brain grows and is born until finally, one day, we're now on the next generation and we're doing providing and modeling. So there's a newer thinking about resilience now. We no longer define it so much in terms of adversity, although I still love it in Master's definition. But we now understand that just as trauma has biological underpinnings and its effects, resilience is rooted in biology. When we become parents, most of this data is, so if I say mother all the time, not being sexist, it just happens that most research is similar research being done on dads. It shows they have all these same brain changes. There's just not as much data. So when we become parents, our brains are literally flooded by the hormone oxytocin. You might know as a relationship hormone. I call it the affiliate hormone because it actually activates the affiliate network structure in the brain, which range from back here in your amygdala through your midbrain all the way up to frontal cortex. And somewhere in there in the midbrain someplace is the dopamine reward system. And the parent, with the activation of that, orients toward their newborn, begins this serve and return relationship that we know is crucial to their relationship and starts the activation of the childhood. And leads to the attunement between parent and child that we call biobehavioral. This is like biology, it's amazing. So this is a sketch of all the parts of the parent's brain that are affected by oxytocin, or that very important affiliate. There are lots of interconnected pathways that really generate pleasure and joy in parenting. And two hormones in particular are involved in that, dopamine and oxytocin. Overwhelming stress, some substances abuse, certain mental health disorders, postpartum depression, can change or hijack the affiliate network pathways and these pathways in the brain that make parenting. It's not their fault. They have changes in their brain that makes parenting less joyful, less pleasant than it is. So we need to be able to make changes that help them. Some rewards. We have parents that are going a little off the path that we might like. So time permitting, I was going to ask all of you how we learn to be parents, and you would probably identify at least some of the things on this list, and probably more. This or less. I put in red how we were parented because when we are under stress, we all revert to how we were parented. If you were lucky, you have a great set of parents or extended family that nurtured you, you're fine. I ask parents, how were you raised? How are you planning to raise your children? The look on their face often tells me how much time I need to spend. And so we learn all that, and then we become a parent. And then we begin to feel completely inadequate, fast. But there's also some other things that affect our temperaments and personalities, our strengths, our challenges, our personal life, our relationship with the other parent, and our extended family, and our support network, our goal and vision for our belief system, our attitudes, range from very negative to very positive. And our mental health, our behavior. So parents struggling with mental illness, I could not get that whole. I tried. It's stuck. People who have mental illness, many individuals with some, and I speak about this from a lot of experience. Many birth parents struggling to get their children back. In my very many years of, they sometimes have reduced emotional achievement, difficulty perceiving and responding to cues. This is vital. Serve and return, first principle, vital. They often view the child as difficult or demanding or have unusual expectations of the child that are out of the child's developmental capabilities. They've been shown by research to have more limited eye contact, smile less, they speak less to their child. Baby needs, and they're often rarely positive. But I like to remember what Dr. Ross Green, author of The Explosive, I read when I was raising my son. Parent and the child before us are doing the very best they can. So we know from the trauma literature over the mental health, with the excessive stress from adversity or trauma, mental illness, substance use disorder, can really fray the threads of this. So Heather Forkey, who is really the queen of it, says the threads of resilience are frayed. So frayd's the acronym. And again, the list is so we can remember. And we may see parents or we may see children with symptoms that should make us think, what has happened to you? What trauma, what adversity? Is there something going on here that I can help? What stressors? Threats and fears. Having difficulty regulating emotions and behaviors. Problems in your attachment relationship, whether that's parent-child, sometimes it's parent, friends, yelling, aggression, tantrums, yawning, sleep disorders, which are very common, educational and developmental delays, or in the case of the parent, inability to sustain employment, or a person who's defeated, dissociating, or depressed. And so, there's a lot of pediatricians. I just want to point out, each of us in this room, we come to this work with our own perspective. And we pediatricians, we have a gift in this universe. First of all, we're honored to take care of them. We meet families very early in their formation. We are often the first child serving profession that families encounter. And sometimes we encounter them at a prenatal. And then we see them continuously over time, particularly in primary care, but even a subspecialist with a child who's got chronic problems is going to be seeing that child. We have multiple opportunities to nurture a family and a child on their journey and to identify challenges and assist them. We're also the gatekeeper for many families for care. It is through us that they often access early interventions. They need. We also can coordinate and monitor that care. Make sure as time goes on that they tend to put them on to other things. Interesting, everyone's what parents expect and want from us as pediatricians. And what they usually say they want is they want information about parenting and child development and reassurance that they're doing a good job. Most parents say that pediatricians are not spending enough time on behavior and development. And that's right now because we don't have a lot of time to spare. So I'm going to talk a little bit about trauma-informed care. Trauma-informed care is really relational. And this is the official definition of trauma-informed care, and you could substitute for health and care, you could substitute early childhood Mental health care. Trauma-informed care is defined by the National Child Traumatic Stress Network as care in which all parties involved assess, recognize, and respond to the effects of traumatic experiences on children, caregivers, and on ourselves. Because we suffer secondary traumatic stress. What is happening? It changes the question in healthcare and probably education and childcare also. From a problem-focused model of what is wrong with you, what has happened to you, what is wrong, so that I can understand and I can help you. So the larger ecosystem that children and families live in also includes that informs parenting, the development of resilience skills, and mediates our responses when bad things happen. It also affects how we, as the providers of care, respond to families. I bring my culture as an immigrant, Irish heritage, Catholic, physician, hearing impaired, into every room that I go into. I also hope to bring a little humility. The shared beliefs, traditions, responsibilities, and connections of hope can build hope and resilience. So appreciating what their culture provides for them that is strong, that promotes resilience, can help them identify things in their culture they can use to help them. Culture is also often what infuses us with a form of bias that is automatic and unintentional. All have implicit bias. It affects our judgments, our decisions, and our behaviors. Medicine is a culture, has a lot of implicit biases with it. We have to reflect on why we respond as individuals. Try to understand where our own blind spots are. Because we have to get past it. That's my segment. It's back to trauma-informed care. So we at the American Academy of Pediatrics don't really trauma-informed care because we feel it's pretty limiting. And when most people think about it, they think I only have to apply it to someone who's had bad things. But trauma-informed care is really, at its heart and center, it is relational care. Every person that crosses our path and comes to us with care deserves relief. It should be a universal approach to care that's trauma-aware and responsive, but resilience-promoting, culturally humble, and by its nature, trauma-informed care or relational care asks us to reflect on our own biases, implicit and explicit, aware how they affect our interactions with families and children. Trauma-informed care requires us to seek and the perspectives of others. There are some more definitions that fit in there. I'm just going to leave them in there. You'll have access to my slides. Because I want to move on to the Harvard Center for the Developing Child. If you've never been on this website, it's a lovely website and a great place to go. Jack Shonkoff is the director there, and he's slides, which I do regularly, I'll say. So these three principles to promote health and development, I actually think are a really nice framework for delivering certainly pediatric care, but probably other types of care too. The three principles are: one, reduce the sources of stress for a family. And I think in peds, and probably all of us around this table are pretty good at figuring out what the parent needs quick. That parent needs some help with food. This parent needs, I need to connect you with a mental health group. But I think we're pretty good at figuring out what the resources in our community, and after tonight, we're really good at it. We don't know each other yet. And trying to reduce the sources of for our families. The other tool, what I'm going to spend time on, supporting those responsive parent relationships and strengthening core skills around emotional regulation. I don't have time to talk about it. So before we can engage families, the first thing that has to happen is they have to feel safe, right? I can't engage you if you not think that you are safe. You have to feel physically safe and you have to feel psychologically safe. There's a lot of subliminal messages that convey safety or not safety. Engagement depends on our ability to dampen somebody's stress response, activate their. And we're at a disadvantage in medicine that I don't think some of the rest of you are at a disadvantage. But our disadvantage is that many of our medical settings are full of nonverbal signals that activate people's fight or flight and stress response. Alarms, low sounding things, doctors staring at their computers, starting, certain smells. And you'll have people tell you, I never go near the hospital. Bad things happen there. The brain uses a process called neuroception. It happens like faster than I did that, a nanosecond or less. The brain asks itself, is this place safe or not safe? Is this person safe or not safe? And the answer to that question all happens in that nanosecond. So we have to create environments that just convey safety to people. Begins in the parking lot and at your front door. Walk through the waiting room. What does it look like? I welcome here. The people who look like me. They understand me. Are they talking to me? A long list. All that gets processed so fast. So this is a diagram out of Andy Warhol's book, and all the fight or flight freeze stuff is over there. That's what we're trying to keep people out of. We're trying to push people over here to their affiliate network. Because when we get into their affiliate network, we get to the thing where we need them to be. And imagine how important this is. Children and child care and education. Or in a new foster. So just as I summed up the entire science of early brain development, I am now going to sum up the entire science of engagement. Or using the affiliate network to engage people. How we greet people. We need to speak their language, and that may require us to have a translator who speaks their language present with us, speaking in their language, their first language. We ask them about their concerns, and that becomes the focus of our agenda. We are present, not staring at my computer, present. I'm asking open-ended questions. Judge Crandall told me about he uses motivational interviewing as a judge. That's what MI is here. It's not Mission Impossible. He is attuned, attentive listening. Reflect back what we hear. Use their language and their words. And we partner. We ask their ideas. What are some of the solutions for culture? Have you tried them? How did they work? Because I have to have a partner to do this. That partner is that family. So these are the 5 steps to building resilience that we use in the trauma world. But these are the 5 steps to building a resilient child who's never had no trauma either. And we can use them with families who are not traumatized, and we can break them down into really little tiny steps to use them with families that are struggling in other ways. The first 2, relationship building and reading the child, are going to be at 3 principles of development, support the relationship. And the last 3 are going to be in the building regulations. So, just reminding us, we're starting at support responsive relationships. So this is hard to do in a busy practice when we have a billion other things to do in our visit. Beginning with, of course, so after you've engaged them. I love this slide, because this slide shows the connection between serve and return and the development. This is also another Center for Development slide. Serve and return evolves as the child evolves into attuned, attentive listening by the parent. Then it develops into conversation. It's all serve and return. We do serve and return with each other every day, all day long. This is the foundation for that work. So this should be something that we pediatricians and anybody who's doing early childhood work should be talking with and teaching and modeling it if it's not something that they know how to do. Relationship building is fundamental pediatric work and it's fundamental early childhood. And we do a lot of it, and we often do it without realizing the power of what we're doing for that family every week. And I just told you the question I asked is how they were raised and how they're planning to raise them. If I get the, oh, you had a great family. Oh, look, here's done. If on the other hand I get, no way, I'm not going to do anything like it. I hate it. I've got a lot of work to do. First of all, I got to figure out what happened. I've got to ask them to reflect on how are you going to change it. It's really hard to make that change because the simple thing to do, especially when you're stressed, is to go right back to what happened to you. And then are you and the other parent on the same page? What do they bring to you? I often only have one parent. Tell them to. But it's a great fix. And it's great. I may not get anything else done in that visit. I make sure the child's alive, and I ask this question. And then I may have to schedule a follow-up visit. As the child matures, I start teaching parents about relationship building, special time, setting aside 10 to 20 minutes a day. If you've got a parent with mental illness or substance using, you may have to go 2 minutes at a time. They may not have the capacity for much more. The activity is chosen and led by the child. Screens are off, phones are off. This shows that the parent's really interested in the child and the child feels bad. And the parent gets to learn how this child thinks, learns, and processes. It's really joyful experience. It really stimulates the affiliate network and the dopamine rewards. For youngest children, you might have to offer them a choice. Puzzle, play with Legos, play with cars. And the parent can use a timer to signal when time is up. But you can do this for toddlers. Play is so important. It is crucial. Everybody here knows this. It's vital to physical, social, cognitive growth, and well-being, healthy brain. The United Nations thinks it's so important they declared a human right for children. Children, it helps them to master their world and conquer their fears. You'll see children who have been traumatized often playing over and over and reenacting what's happened to them. They practice adult roles, learn to work cooperatively in groups, they learn to resolve conflicts, and once again, parents, by observing it, learn a lot about how their child perceives and about the world. So my second R underneath building relationship is reading the child. Not reading to the child, I'm gonna get there. Reading the child. So this is the cognitive triangle. It's a concept out of the mental health field. And it tells, we're often taught a lot of behavior management as pediatricians and child supposed to be able to put them out of time out before they'll stop doing it. Or just distract. You should be saying, what underlies this behavior? Behavior is a symptom. It reflects the child's emotions and their thoughts. And so Adia Spinks-Franklin, who's a developmental behavioral pediatrician, her grandmother taught her, you have to study your child. And we know this is true in the newborn period, right? We see the kid in the hospital at the newborn visit, then we see them 2 weeks later, and the parent can already tell you this cry needs that cry needs something else, and my baby's hungry, or they need their diaper changed. Studying their child, or getting to know their child, it's a wonderful thing. So, behaviors include, we're all detectives. Parents are detectives. Figure out what the behavior needs. Why is JoJo having tantrums in childcare? 10 minutes. They were anyway. So it's just trying to figure out what has happened, what is happening, what's going on. And the language of emotions, building emotional vocabulary. Kids have, basically, kids you deal with and I deal with, have 4 words for emotions. Happy, sad, angry, scared. There's a lot of words for emotions, and they're right there. In Mark Brackett's front cover, he has 100 words for emotion, from unpleasant to pleasant, low energy to high energy. And it's important to encourage caregivers to help manage their emotions. And reading, we're going to read with. Reading's wonderful. It's literacy, it's fun, builds parents' understanding of their child, it creates teachable moments, and it's a great way to teach the language of emotions. Start to crying. What just happened? How do you think he feels? And it also, and now just to go to emotional regulation for a minute, remember we're trying to move people from fight or flight back to their affiliate network. And the 3 things that we use here are reassurance, ease, and regulation. Reassurance and regulation are actually really close. Just as we remain calm when we're dealing with a distressed parent or child in our offices or places, we can explain to parents the importance. If you're not feeling calm on the inside, you need to look calm. We've all been there, right? Your brain's going like this. You've got to remain present. And we've got to remain reassuring and the child is. Because what are we trying to do for them? They're in fight or flight. Trying to calm them down, get back into affiliate, get them back to thinking the ball. Can't do that if you're a dysregulated adult. If the adult's dysregulated, the child can't regulate. They need adult to help. This works, by the way, from toddlers to teens. Calm, remain present, and tolerates touch or holding. You do that. If they don't, you don't. Stay. I love the context. Great. So there's a lot going on in this picture. This caregiver is using the affiliate response. He's holding the child, and at the same time, he's holding the child's strong emotions. He's reassuring the child. He may be speaking in a high-pitched voice and saying things the kid doesn't even understand because the child's really young, but he will understand the safety message that parents. Routines and rituals. So we all discovered during the beginning of the pandemic how much we valued our routines and rituals. Got to establish whole new ones in order to get ourselves back to a space where we were now thinking. So flexible, predictable routines. Preparation of children for transitions is very important. Out here, at home, and or in the doctor's office, and greet your patients. What you offer them on the way out the door, usually a sticker. And just those little rituals that we all have that get kids and families through visits. They go to expect those. This is the one that says kids can't regulate. So caregiver has to modulate their own emotions to help the child modulate theirs. And then we can teach parents about self-care and calming themselves and things that they can do to help their child manage their thoughts and emotions so they can get back to some goal directing. And this is what I've probably already talked about. First, the parent does it for the child, just the way the caregiver picks up the voice. They provide, they do the breathing and calming for the reassurance. Then they do it with the child. Then they help the child. Then eventually the child takes this slowly over time. They build a set. And on this slide, there are 7 different calming stress responses that you can actually teach people about. Reading through. Some of these are great because they also activate things like the vagus muscles, so blowing bubbles and deep breathing, squeezing muscles like one by one, so you focus on doing it, and it kind of gets appropriate receptive centers the brain and actually on the brain, because we all know when we're stressed, the brain is energetic. And another place I like to go with regulation, especially for younger kids, but I've also used it for teenagers. Sesame Street, Elmo's belly breathing. So Elmo has everybody take 3 deep breaths. Like that. A very sweet video, and my teenagers roll their eyes and make it look better. They like it. So, it's actually my favorite age group. It's the one I was terrified of when I was freshman. And this is the ACEs where in California there's Stress Buster wheel. And I think the pediatricians in the room will all notice that we recommend a lot of this stuff already. Quality sleep, balanced nutrition, and physical activity. Some of us are teaching mindfulness in our practices. We talk about getting out into nature. We certainly make mental health referrals, and we've already about supportive relationships. And I just want to, this is my positive parenting pyramid. You'll notice a lot of the stuff that I talked about is at the bottom and should be used more frequently. But this positive specific traits, we often in pediatrics, parents about catching a child being good instead of yelling at them when they're doing something they don't want them to do. Catch them in those good moments where, God, I really like the way you treated your brother there. That was really nice. You made him feel really good too. So being very specific about what was good and commenting on it. We can do this in our offices. We started doing this in my practice back in Rochester with parents, especially our birth parents who would see that sliver of a moment where the parent would really listen to something their child was saying. Really like the way you just listened to him right there. He was so tuned in. That is so good for him. It was amazing, like just that one little thing, you'd see him stand up straighter. So we had a catch the parent being good contest. At the end of the day, we all had to compare notes. Far more creative. And then the parents struggling with mental illness, empathy, understand what happened to them. They're doing the best they can given their circumstances. Parents, I know you want what's best for your child because they do. And it's just taking those same things and breaking them down into itsy bitsy things. I want them to experience this. So my last bunch of slides are about the AAP. Don't need to hear that. There's some references for everybody. There's resources for pediatricians, resources for parents. Just remind you, parents are the magicians of ordinary magic. And we can use our multiple contacts with them to build skills over time, focus on the relationship, and partner across systems, get all the help that every child is held sacred.
So we're gonna have some time for questions now. Dr. O'Connor is gonna field questions. She has a couple already to go, but if you have questions you've jotted down on index cards, please hold them up and we will.
Thank you. Wonderful presentation. Send in your questions. So I have a question here. It's more specific about what you maybe expand on some of the things you talked about. How do you suggest physicians quickly teach parents about resiliency and activity?
I start with just saying to families, we have the same goal. You want your child to grow healthy, confident, generous, kind. And those are all skills you're going to build over time. I'm going to help you. And if it's a newborn, it's easy. We start serving the term. But I pick up kids in my book. With the population I serve from 0 to 17 and a half, or almost 18. So, you know, the teenagers, I'm often speaking with them. But I will start by asking, tell me 3 things that you recognize as strengths in your child. Then I use that to talk about what you're doing for his building, right? And I often start with catch your kid being good. That's a great resilience builder. And then I back into, You know, the advantage of continuity of care is I can back into the other stuff over time. We also have some handouts in our office that help. The 3 R's handout is available for free at the Pediatric website. Eric, we just launched.
All right. Do you have any considerations to share for families of children with special needs, either physical or neurodevelopmental?
I would say I've learned so much from those times. What everybody else. I think what I've learned from most families is to celebrate the victories, no matter how small they are. Those special moments where a child accomplishes something. And make sure that the child is very aware that you're celebrating that way. I think that was probably one of the greatest lessons I ever learned as a pediatrician. Some families, the smallest little advance is the bigger. And the way the child's brain works. There's a developmental cascade in there someplace. It's gonna show up.
This is a big question. What are 1 or 2 bold or significant improvements you would like to see manifested to help children and their families?
My top 20 things might be a better question. Rather, so many. If I was going to start in where I work in the world of pediatrics, I would say that the way we do pediatric visits will be based families from us and not on the short little visit schedules that I have right now to deal with. I'm a little luckier than most pediatricians for 4 minutes my kids need them. Because I do think that there's a lot we can do. I also realize the limitations of pediatric. Episodic, as I said, in people's lives. And those of you who are home, my God, what an opportunity. Or who have kids in your early intervention programs, what an opportunity. I would probably turn the pay scale system upside down in the United States, and I would invest so much more money in children, and a lot less money in a lot of other things. Right now we have families that are so stressed just trying to make ends meet that it is really hard. I grew up in a low income home. I know what financial stress does. I get wonderful parents, but there were times like they were so preoccupied. I could have probably set off a bomb in the house next door and they would not have known. So I really do think this thing about decreasing stress, there's a lot of need for families and employers to speak up to our insurance companies and to our government officials. We paid family leave. Really. We need quality childcare that families can rely on. We need funding for all of these evidence-based home visitation programs. There's a lot of funding coming through Congress for this, but it's a drop in the bucket. 5% of the families who need it get it. We need high quality, and no matter what school you go to in this country as a child, you should be guaranteed that you are going to get a quality education. You're not going to be disadvantaged by your zip code. So we have a lot of work to do as a country to take the rich resources in this country and actually seriously and intentionally apply them to children and families. It'll take a lot of time to do that. Everybody in this room knows what children are out there talking to people.
Do you have anything to say about the deprivations you may have faced related to COVID, social degree? Maybe how to deal with this?
COVID, the isolation that happened as a result of COVID was devastating for a lot of children and families, particularly for our most marginalized, for those who are on the front lines of care and marginalized. They certainly suffered the most. Yes, some kids got back into school very quickly. There was a wonderful little article in the New York Times saying, well, there's a wonderful little article stated, I think it was, school kids about what they wanted, you know, what pandemic was like for them and what happened, what school worry about, yada yada. What do they want from adults? Want us to listen to. Listen, simple, listen to them, pay attention to them. What stood out for me in that article, besides that, was that during COVID, hardest for them was the isolation. They were isolated. They were isolated. One kid actually said, I really thought like school, I didn't realize it's actually cured the viewers. That was a revelation to this year. It was so kid, like all the comments were just so kid comments. You know, they're just children. Yes, so I do think there was deprivation and isolation. I don't think we really realized the impacts yet. I think they were far worse for some children than others. I think our special needs kids were probably out of school the longest, suffered the most, and may never make up. Some of them may never make up for those losses. The head of the National Education Association said to me, I don't want to hear about losses, because I think the brain is still malleable enough in childhood and adolescence that we can make up. Just really hope she's
Thank you. So this is a local question, but international implications as well. Is that you may not be aware, but actually San Luis Obispo County has the highest percentages of moms during pregnancy. Part of it is due to have a very headline culture in this area, and so
I've enjoyed
it. So we have someone who's kind of wondering, you know, using these concepts that you're bringing, how can we help to prevent FASTs, or once we have them?
I know you have public health, and I certainly think national public health awareness campaign is a good thing. You know, we all worry about methamphetamine and heroin, and sometimes the combination of drugs and pot. Another thing that we don't know the effects of, actually, because we can study it for some. Because the law was scientists do alcohol that is devastating. It is the substance I actually worry about as a pediatrician. And I ask about all the others. People don't admit anymore. Have no history. So it's a big problem. And most kids, as many of you probably know, who've been exposed to alcohol anally, do not have any symptoms unless it happens and so we as pediatricians and everybody else is at a disadvantage. So yes, I think a public awareness campaign, and I think maybe have a good use of the dollars from the wine bottles that you all have to start that awareness campaign. Like, we hope you enjoy your wine before you're pregnant and after delivery. And please, in that interval of time, please do not drink it. There's no safe level of alcohol. Science is, I mean, that's been the mantra for years. Enabled during pregnancy, but it's now become a mantra for all that has effects on the brain. It does not stop me from enjoying the occasional glass of wine, but I do think that you probably just need to invest some dollars in awareness, because I really don't know any clients by the time they is earlier you drink, the greater the probably because alcohol no reason. It's a big problem, and the problem with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder is certain parts of the brain, particularly the frontal cortex, is that executive function and emotional regulation kind of plateau, and that's and that manifests itself in ulcer.
We are out of time. I apologize for any of you questions get to today, and thank you very much, Dr. for sharing.
The best questions that have been written down on cards is that we have them, and it's our hope that we can collect, compile questions that have come out of, generated out of this evening, and work on answers moving to the future. My name is Wendy Nguyen. I'm the Executive Director of First 5 San Luis Obispo County, and I'm just so thrilled we all made it safely and are able to dine together and learn from our colleagues, learn from Dr. Salaji, and I'm really excited about what's coming up next. We have a wonderful panel of panels who is going to share with you a number of ideas and perspectives coming up in just a couple minutes. I'm going to ask you to indulge me in a 90-second 7th inning stretch. Please don't leave the building. There's some really exciting information coming your way, but we have a scene change here and want to move some chairs around. Those of you who are on my panel, please come on up. And for the rest of you, take a stretch, and there are some leftover desserts here for the taking, so run that way if you're hungry.
I'm struggling here. I saw you like we sides too, and I'm like, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I'm really sorry. I live here so right now. Yeah, I'm working as a healthcare recruiter, staffing agency. Which is kind of nice to see the other side of things a little bit. But I'm super excited. I know. I'm sorry. Yeah. Yeah, she's definitely made a very big difference. Which grad school about? It's I'm on for school psychology, so I'm getting my EDS. So I should do 1 year internship. President State is my first. No, they have President State and then they have President State. Yes. But I and I it's like, oh my gosh, I love yeah. I don't understand. I'm not. Yeah. Oh. I just got my budget and then I spoke to Oh, for sure.
My 90 seconds are now.
That's-
90 seconds now.
I think the area.
And as we do in early childhood education, that works pretty darn well, doesn't it, Marika? Okay, so this is my personal favorite part of the evening. We're calling this the speed panel of panels. And as you can see, we have an illustrious group of folks up here in front of you. We are going to engage in 3 very rapid, tease your creativity and give you some ideas kinds of conversations. This is not meant to go deep at this time, but please pay attention to what these folks are talking about with each other. Hopefully you will find inspiration. You will think of somebody you'd like to talk to further. You want to get more ideas from the groups that are here in front of you tonight. Starting over on my far right, we're going to have an initial conversation facilitated by Allison Borgsmiller, who is a nurse practitioner in Dr. Bravo's office, Bravo Pediatric. She and her team will be talking first this evening on the topic of early intervention in the traditional sense of referral to places like Tri-Counties Regional Center, Martha's Place, special education. This is the first conversation we're going to have you listen to, almost like a fishbowl. They're not talking to you, they're talking to each other. So lean in, listen to the conversation they're going to have with each other. The second conversation will be facilitated by Dr. Jim McGee, who is a pediatrician from CHC, the Paso Clinic, and he is speaking with Marika Van Beerden. The 2 of them will be having a conversation, which you'll hear about a little bit more, on pediatric referrals when it's not quite clear what the pathway is. Mild to moderate, it's non-diagnosable. I can't quite put my finger on it, but there's something going on and I'd like to be able to support this family. Jim and Marika are going to have a conversation about some of the opportunities in the community for pediatricians to work with community-based partners in that more amorphous space. The other thing that they will also unpack a little bit is the relationship between pediatricians and early childhood educators. And I'll let Marika and Jim explain why they in particular are going to have that conversation. And then finally, way outside the box, Dr. Nisha Abdul-Qadir will be interviewing Bill Spencer and Kathleen Lockyer about some of what you might not think of as referrals or opportunities for support when it comes to relational or mental health in the community for young children. But as you'll see, they have some wonderful ideas in that fantastic free zone. It doesn't involve an official referral, but involves really tapping into helping parents and families tap into resources and opportunities in the community that cost not a dime. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic quite literally to Allison and her coffee club to have a conversation.
All right, I think I'm on. Okay, so it's finally nice to sit down and talk with you guys about the patients we identify in our clinic and how to so typically, just so you kind of know what we encounter every day is about minutes to really get to know our patients, have our routine well-filed visits. Those are really instrumental for us as providers. I'm a nurse practitioner and I work with a team of physicians, health coordinators, and getting those children going through their developmental milestones on a relatively quick, brief basis. But also when we highlight and identify somebody, how to connect that with the community and hopefully as early on as possible. And so typically, the big screenings that we see is at 9 months and 18 months and 30-month well checks. This is really the social, emotional, making sure we're hitting those critical milestones. And then once we have a family identified, I have a wonderful team of referral coordinators and staff that will be reaching out and expediting those referrals based on the patients that we have, the insurance that families have, and trying to connect them. And what we would like to do is figure out a better way to expedite those referrals and get the information you need to make it seamless as possible and better outcomes for everyone.
So, I'm part of Sloan County Behavioral. Our specialty clinic is one of the places. So we are serving primarily medical and FinHealth. So we do get a lot of community referrals. It's a little bit different than the so referrals can come in parents, but it can also come in from the pediatric office. From that get found. Sometimes when we get those referrals, they develop. And so one of the things that we're looking for is that we process referrals quicker, more information about the social, emotional. So, that's important. And then, we're also having some challenges in terms of our referral needs are bigger than us right now. We have a lot of effort for staff, so that we can really, bigger. But I'm curious, what kind of barriers you found when referring to?
Primarily, I would say our patient population from pediatrics is primarily private insurance. So we actually, I feel like in our communities right now have really good resources. So connecting those people right now, that is kind of what Tri-County's kind of to play a little bit.
I'm with Tri-County's Regional Center, and Tri-County's providing earlier intervention for children from birth. Referrals come from working parents, pediatricians, daycare providers. Part of the challenge with some of the referrals is that the education of parents is not there. So our service peers or coordinators that reach out to our families don't always get to follow with that referral. And then we see those referrals almost like it or along the lines, and we didn't. But that's one of the challenges we're having. Every child that comes to regional center will get an assessment. We look at all areas of development, cognition, language, motor skills, affective, social. And the criteria to qualify for regional center is 25% to life area or an established risk, Down syndrome, or high risk, closed or finish free. Another challenge we're having is that some of the referrals come in a little later than expected. So we really want to work with these families to transition to this. We get very little services for that. Our service coordinators don't necessarily get handoff for that. Parents as much as early referrals here. One of the things I think challenges the referral are that medical records don't always come in. So our clinical team, our clinical staff, will be the probably in touch.
Great, and just to clarify, which right now, we see you guys also do FinHealth and private insurance.
So we do, yeah. So under the umbrella, so we do early intervention services. We also have our service coordinators walk our families through what generic resources are out there, the community, through insurance, through SINCAL, and if those providers are reason that we just funding for those. Every child will get an early interventionist, which is something to have that teacher in the home looking at all areas of development. For specialties that like therapy, OTs, yes, we do refer to insurance. Will help.
And just to clarify also too, with when we're kind of working up a diagnosis, we don't have concrete diagnosis yet. It's nice to be able to a patient review still kind of working out, and you welcome that even if it's.
Yes, of course, yeah. Diagnosis doesn't necessarily drive the certain in the development of the child, where they're at. When the interventionists are in, they're also looking at child's whole development. So you may refer for motor skills, but then end up with speech and other services.
We also don't need a specific diagnosis, so we're looking at social determinants of health, looking at any risk factors like homelessness, prenatal exposure, anything that would put the child's development at risk. But looking more at the social emotional needs, but partnering and transforming for when there are some with cognitive concerns, or this being involved. It partners with public. So we're always looking at which doors the best for the child to come in. If they're under a year, oftentimes they may start on our medical side to get a thorough screening, and then one and older.
You also have providers in house.
Jump in with a question or two? Okay. This is actually. I don't know how to use microphones. Most of you, when you filled out your registrations, answered a question about challenges in being able to effectively refer children and families to appropriate. So I summarized some of these challenges that were articulated. So I meant to tell you all that I was going to ask you this, but you don't have to solve the dilemma. But I'm interested in your perspective on any of the following that I'm going to share. As you, I'm sure, I would not be surprised, there were a lot of comments about access to providers, and that fell into a number of different categories. Lack of providers in our community, in particular specialty areas, mental health therapy, therapists specializing in early childhood mental health concerns, bilingual capacity, psychiatric care, play therapy, and as was addressed at the end of Dr. Saji's talk, focus on FAS spectrum. Insurance limitations are an issue, cost. Rural isolation was brought up by a number of people. Inconvenient hours for parents who are raising children or working full time, and not enough in-person hours. That in the context of COVID, we've gotten comfortable with virtual service, and sometimes in-person is what's needed, especially. So I wonder if the three of you can reflect on any of those comments at all, either double down on them or suggest possible hopeful perspective.
I would say that I agree with all of it. We're definitely within our county system. But we're also seeing a change in that more people are showing interest in applying county employees, and so we're taking that opportunity to provide training. So one of the things that we've implemented is, actually started at the beginning of the pandemic, is a once a week consultation group that does address training in the area of FESD as well as play therapy and we're actually having all new staff that are coming on that are not working for this, trying to build capacity in that way, and looking at how can we provide services for Purdue County, I would say North County, definitely have those. And we can't make it to cameras as well. The big one. So making sure that our training staff and all the time. And getting creative during the pandemic. I know that I personally was out in a lot of parks in people's backyards. And went back field-based for a while because well, it's not the same. So trying to find ways to
The regional center has changed staffing. For sure, we have a lot of need for providers. But I do feel with insurance carriers that have either waiting lists or they are not able to fund for staffing, regional centers that have their providers or our providers that the children don't have. We do see providers still doing remote services and virtual. A lot of parents want in-home face, so we are having a challenge. Our providers are wonderful though, sometimes it's hybrid, sometimes in person, sometimes remote. And I think it's the families to still get it face to face. Forgot the other points of staffing. I know the long list.
It's a long list.
We are trying to accommodate the long in person formal, but otherwise remote.
And I think, in primary pediatrics, I've noticed there's been a shift, and I think it was COVID, we really needed this on focusing on mental health and, establishing some resources and even a common communication. Intervention service providers, education providers, by using certain training tools like the ages and one project with that. We found out some ages really appropriate, some not so much, and using the SE, social emotional really for 30 months, 60 months was really helpful. And I know we were able to communicate. That was very helpful. Preschools, daycare providers, it was nice to see them start screening those kids and we're able to really learn how to communicate. And we use chat in the class before, and I know that helps. But I girls well. Just kind of coming together and realizing that focus and best outcomes come from
Fantastic. Thank you. Group number one. To not officially introduce Rachel Tarver from County Behavioral Health and Jennifer Del Castillo, our new early start manager for Tri-Counties Regional Center Sales. So thank you to all three of you. One other comment that was made multiple times in the pre-survey, and Dr. Salak mentioned it as well, and I think in your conversation, I just want to underscore it, is this concept of early. Also want to remind you that your index cards are still in play. If you have questions, we'll take questions for all three sets of panelists at the very end of the conversation, but you're more than welcome to write down questions now, and Chris will put them in. Second up, Dr. Jim McGee, welcome, from CHC Paso Clinic, and Marika Van Burden, who is behavioral health specialist with Capslo, and I'll let her introduce you more about what she does in the course of their conversation. Take it away.
So I know I'm having the hardest time in the conversation. I have like 500 questions. I feel like you guys just kind of pried open the top of can of worms and get a chance to get in so much. We use you guys so much. HC, we have a large population, very heavy on Medicaid, 90% Medicaid, many languages. For the first time, I actually had a patient who spoke sub-dialect of Deco. Wasn't even the Deco, sub-dialect. And so I had, probably she had a daughter there translating, but I hear she was, because she struggle in our clinic. Very busy. We have a lot of patients, and we have a lot of families that are parents working, very low income, limited time, lots of children with them. You get certain services, limited amount of time, and we have a child in the mix with delayed, with a little slow on this. We do our screens, our ASP screens, and we're picking up that there are certain delays. And we need to find ways to be effective, get our kids to where they need to go. And it's a challenge sometimes. feel like there's so many directions, so many groups. And as I said to you before, I feel like you're all like these boxes. And what's inside this? Their fists are the diagnosticians, are there clinical workers, and who is in each of these boxes? Know where to send my patients effectively. Then when I got involved with making, I was super excited because I was like, I'm going to understand what's inside. So my first question to you is, tell us about your way.
So I'm talking mainly to you today about the Help Me Grow program. So it's a fairly new program in SLO County, and we are a resource and referral program for children 0 to 5. And that's the only criteria. The child has to be 0 to 5 and live in SLO County. There's no income criteria or anything. So if you're not quite sure what to do with the child, we can help you with that. But also, we've looked inside the box, right? So we know what's inside all those boxes, so we know where to send this child. We might not know right away, but we're gonna help the family figure that out. We have specialists that will work with the family and help connect them to that resource, maybe several resources, and make sure they get a connection. And then also follow up with the family in 60 days, 90 days to make sure they're continuing to make that connection. We do want more of a connection with physicians in your world because you guys see these children on a regular basis, like Dr. Shalaji said, you know, from sometimes prenatal all the way up until they're 17. And you guys see them all the time. So the parents trust you guys and they trust your opinion. So sometimes in our world, we don't quite get that trust. So that's another part that Wendy mentioned. I also wear 2 hats at Community Action Partnership. Not only do I work with the Healthy Grow program, but I also work in the Head Start program, so in early childhood education. So a lot of teachers see children every day, right? And we see that there might be concerns for children, but we would like that more of a partnership between teachers who see children every day and the physician community who see children on a regular basis, so we can work together.
So at the Help Me Grow, you have Spanish connections with people.
Yes, we have a bilingual specialist on staff who speaks Spanish, but for other languages, we do need to use interpreters, which I'm sure you can say.
Right.
So, but we want to make that connection with families. We'll go to their home then. Usually that's the most powerful thing we can do is go to a family's home and see their everyday life, their living condition, what's going on, which you guys don't have the benefit. So we can go to their home, talk to them in their environment about what's going on, learn a little bit more. Our specialists have a background in child development and early intervention services. So not only do we know what to expect, you know, the milestones to look for, but also, like I said, we know the resources.
And this state, I send that you look. What is it that we don't know that we don't know that we should be saying? What information really helped you? All right.
Well, actually, you know, the referrals you guys send us have a lot of the information that we need. It's just the initial, like, I have this one concern.
Yeah.
That's all we need is I have this one little concern. And then we're gonna get to know the family a little bit more. We're home, meeting with them. There might be some other concerns, but as long as there's that one little window, that one concern, that can open up the door for us to see, oh, there's all this other stuff. So they might need something.
And your other You said you have a lot of teachers, but in your centers, have, behavioral specialists evaluate at the center. Okay?
Correct, yeah. So the Head Start program is a unique early childhood education program. And the Head Start not only delivers early childhood education, but we also provide behavioral support for the children, disability support for children who need that. We have a whole health team that makes sure the children are going to their child checks and if they have allergies or medications they take. We have a whole team that oversees that portion. We also have a team that works on parent, family, community engagement, so making sure those families are engaged in their child's education. So that's in the Head Start world. But really in the early childhood education world, whether it's private preschool or daycare, those teachers are working with the children every day, not only formally, doing developmental screenings, but also just informal development every day, and making sure the children are meeting those milestones.
It feels to me like this is I feel like this is a real miss opportunity. Guys, because you guys are spending all this time with these kids, but we're not 7 minutes, right? 15 minutes. Sometimes 7 minutes to do evaluations, fill out a paper. You get that hit. That was perfect on everything. So honest, nice. So, we have very limited limitations. Guys are seeing months and months. You are seeing like a pattern represents a problem in a way where that can be passed on us care that they need before it gets it.
Right, exactly. So yeah, we see those ASQs too, where the boxes are checked. Yeah, those are wonderful. But the beauty of it is we get to then see that child in real life and say, oh, wait a minute, that wasn't, we need to redo this.
Yeah.
And you guys don't get that opportunity. So I think some sort of line of communication directly to the physician would be really beneficial for these children. I think as physicians, it's coming from outside. It's hard to talk to you, right?
Who's here?
Right? An appointment, all that. So some sort of direct line of communication, a partnership between the early childhood education community and the physician community would be a magic, another ordinary magic, you know?
Or not, but I think you heard on this last piece of the conversation, it was brought up in several of the pre-surveys as well. Misalignment or non-alignment of communication, incredibly important and seminal sectors, working with children during early childhood, those being pediatricians and early childhood educators. So I feel like you two, just in this 10 minutes of conversation, scratched on a potential change or improvement, systemic improvement that we can take on society in San Luis Obispo County. I was pleased to hear, actually, Allison, you mentioned that some of that happens organically on an individual basis, but are there ways to further bolster that communication, that line of communication? So I'm going to stop there for now. Get ready for questions that may come to the audience in a few minutes, but I'm going to move on to our third. Oh yes, thank you, Jason. And then in your packets are all kinds of bits of information on those boxes that Dr. McGee talked about. Please take them home with you. Read them, contact people for more information. One very critical piece that is not in that packet, however, is the Help Me Grow flyer. Is that correct? I think it didn't make it to us in time, and it is waiting for you out on the way out, when you leave this evening, you have 3 things to do. One is to pick up a Help Me Grow Slow, Slow Help Me Grow flyer. 2 is to return your lanyard, so when we have another town hall, not 5 years from now, but sooner than that, you will still have your lanyards to pass out again, and then also, please do fill out an evaluation form and put it in the back. Little attitudes. Oh, and it's CMEs, if you haven't signed up for that, please do, on your way out, sign up, okay. Last but not least, the grand finale speed panel, led by Dr. Nishad Gulkadar, also includes Bill Spencer, a parent coach working with Parent Connection, and Kathleen Lockyer, an occupational therapist with a special interest and talent and skill around nature-based experiences as a context for early childhood development, family bonding, and
Thank you. So my practice is a little bit different probably than most of yours as a child abuse pediatrician, where I do evaluations with Dr. Mary Nave at the Suspected Abuse Response Team, as well as seeing children birth to 5 at Marcus Place along with Dr. Mulcairn. And so I have a luxury of a little bit more time than a lot of busy pediatricians. I'm known to corral a family in my exam room until I have the answer of where I'm going to refer them to. And I will be seen running up and down the hallways to the public health department and trying to find a public health nurse who can help answer the questions that I have. So it is a little bit of a different situation. However, I have my cheat sheet. I love it. The stress buster. Is it up there? It's coming up there. So any of you in providers, or you can use it in early childhood, in education settings, wherever, ACEs Aware website has the Stress Busters wheel. And this is your cheat sheet to looking at mental health ideas and assessments that you can do. And what I find really important about this wheel is that you can really tailor it to a lot of the things that Dr. Szilagyi was talking about, because you can look at it and say, well, not physical activity, but what makes sense for your family. And in that process, you can learn a lot about that family and also kind of encourage one of those stress busting areas. And as you go through that wheel, you can also, these are things that you can start working on right now. You don't have to be on a waiting list to start working on stress busters. And you can assess which of those stress busters are kind of low-lying fruit for that family, and which are the ones that are hard reaches. And I think those are opportunities to talk about areas where you can help that family. So, for example, I recently had at Martha's Place a young mother whose child had gone through the foster system for a while and United, and their case had been closed. And this mom came and during the course of the appointment started crying and getting teary, and she has no support. She no longer has us. Her family is in a different city, and she doesn't feel safe to go live with that family, and so she's alone with this 3-year-old who is having behaviors that are very challenging for her. Because we're not at mobile crisis level, but we are in a significant area of change. And when you look at the stress buster wheel, it's like, well, guess what? She's actually on a wait list for mental health care. She's got that one too. But what I felt was what she was really missing at that particular moment was supportive relationship. This is somebody who can a parent. Give her the number of Parent Connection, and so can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. My name is Bill Spencer. I'm a parent coach and educator for the Parent Connection. I have been doing this for 13 years. We've been, actually Parent Connection has been in existence with the, sorry, yay. And so we work together for a long time. My main function is to help support parents with concerns that they have, whether they're a 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 26-year-old, and provide some support for them. And one good thing about our program is that there is no wait list. So within 24 hours, a parent coach is available to help. And in within 24 hours, we and find out what they're. The other good thing, and there's no stipulation that anybody. When we first started out, a lot of the parents we saw were in person, but since 2020, we've been doing Zoom and on the phone, 45 minutes an hour, a parent, and average probably I meet with parents 4 to 5 times. If we can help them with their behavioral concerns, then we other help them, or along with other issues.
So, again, thinking about, the stress busters and what can we do right away. Again, one of the practices up there is mindfulness activities. And I think, again, that's one of those areas we can delve into sort of the cultural competencies and the strengths that somebody may be bringing. And sometimes that's spiritual practices that the family is involved with, and you can tap into that pretty easily too. When you think about access to nature, that's become something that we actually have scientific research on. We just saw some studies coming out showing that women who have exposure to eye-level green space have lower levels of postpartum depression. We know about the studies in Japan of tree bathing and better T cell function, so better immune system functioning. So getting out into nature generally in our county is pretty easy. I mean, most of our county is pretty safe, generally have pretty good weather, and but Kathleen, could you tell us a little bit about getting into nature, and particularly in this context of relationships and developing that?
Yeah, I was thinking about that when we were listening earlier about the serve and return experience and how nature is constantly sending us serves from the moment we're born. And this Park RX, has anyone heard of Park RX? Millie, where are you? Yay, Millie's getting that going in our county. And so this is a great opportunity for pediatricians and other practitioners to really support the nature connection piece, because we know that nature is not just something that makes us feel good, but it's necessary in our development. It's been something we've been engaging with for 1 million years since the beginning of human existence, and it's how we've developed. And we know that our sensory processing systems have developed through the connection with the natural world. That way we see and hear and feel and touch, and everything that comes in through our senses, our brain has to process. That is the foundation for emotional regulation and all of our higher cognitive tasks that we have to do. So the idea of serve and return, the wind touching our skin and feeling that, really not just ignoring it, but actually feeling that. And it's a really nice entry point to help parents understand that they can take a step outside with their child. And even if they don't know maybe how to connect with their child directly, they can connect with that wind on their face and model that and look to their child and let their child do the same thing. And that can be the beginning. So Park RX writing nature prescriptions, there's pediatricians doing this all over. Have you heard of the nature prescriptions program? So pediatricians around the country are now writing prescriptions for nature. And that's what the Park RX program is going to be doing in our county through the San Luis Obispo Botanical Gardens is heading. So I'm really excited about that program. A little bit. Oh, can I say also, so there is research too that so nature is not just something that helps us develop, but it's also a protective and compensatory experience. So we know about ACEs, and not everybody's heard about PACEs. So that's a protective and a compensatory experience. And we know that research is being done to show that nature is one of those things. So even if a child has adverse experiences, they have access to nature as a young child, they can use that throughout their lifetime to mitigate some of those adverse experiences.
I really appreciate the concept of spending time in nature, but then also using it as a platform to develop those relationships as well, so that and get multiple benefits. I think it also a lot of times is related to getting exercise too. Spending time in nature may that are physical as well. Could you tell us a little bit about how your programs help the relationship with the through the parent?
Well, relationship are primary developing, a child that is happy and healthy. That's good. Good. And one of the things that I always encourage parents to do, that special time, that one. One of the things talking to a parent the other day about non-directed play, you were explaining that you spend 20 minutes with that one kid, just themselves, they want to play, is and a lot of times it happens. The other thing is a lot of time on self-care. One sign that my mom had in her kitchen is when mom's not happy. Actually, it's the other. When mom's happy, everybody's happy. and so finding out, what are the stresses in that family? What are the stresses? What are their specific concerns about? Is it normal? Is my kid normal? Is it not normal? What are those developments? And so we're able to discuss that. And when we do lots of parenting classes, being parents, and that, oh wow, I'm not the as a kid, not the only. So tucking this down or whatever. Some of those we can normalize a little bit. Even if they're normal, they're still a stress for a lot of the parents. We'll judge those concerns and I try to help them in a strength-based way. So we look at the strengths of the parent, and what are some of the times when you were successful in helping your kid? What are some things that you've done in the past? Think that you could do this? So those are all kinds of questions in a non-judgmental.
And how are the ways that a family can access?
It's really, that's the beauty of our program is that it's just. At this point, we have not even done. The agencies can fill out a form and send it. Parents can call.
In your folder.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm going to be inundated tomorrow. So at this point, we have no waiting list, and hopefully we won't. We're ready to help a parent help, no matter how little or big the concern is.
That doesn't have to just come from a pediatrician. Anybody who's contacting has touching your family.
Anybody can self-referral. They can do it on our website, sloparents.org. They can call directly. That's in the packet, and that's really.
Thank you, panel 3. I listened to your preparation conversations before tonight, and I've learned about, like you said, Genevieve, and 15 other things I want to ask all of you. I have a couple of questions that have already been submitted for the group as a whole, and I'll let you fight over the mic in answering these two questions. And please do, Chris is available to collect other questions. We have a little bit of time left. To access all of these services and to optimize services, our families have to become fierce advocates. How do we start that conversation and help them through their advocacy journey? I can think of a couple of you in particular who might have something to say about parents as advocates for child's. Have thoughts, please raise your hand and grab a mic.
I think it's just about educating parents on being their child's advocate. Unfortunately, that's the system we live in. Our keynote was touched on that. That's the system we live in, and as Dr. Riggy was saying, there's all these little boxes, right? So it is hard for parents to navigate those boxes and to navigate the system and to be an advocate for their child. But I think just the first step is educating parents that you are going to need to be an advocate for your child, but you don't have to do it alone. So there's my plug-in for Help Me Grow, that we can definitely be an advocate for you and help you navigate that system and be that support.
Thank you. This might also be a question for you again, Rika. Sorry, you're on the hot seat in the middle. How common is it for childcare providers to do developmental screening? And how can they notify pediatricians, or who should?
So I can answer for the Head Start world. In Head Start particularly, which is an income-based childcare, we are mandated by law to do the ages and stages questionnaire every year for a child program. So if a child's in Head Start that you see, you know they've had a developmental screening. There are other private preschools and daycares who also do the ages and stages questionnaire or other types of developmental screening. Unfortunately, I can't answer who does and who does not. But, in Head Start, we do it. And we can definitely share that information with you. We typically have the parents sign a release of information, so we're able to talk with you. The parents give us that permission. So we can share that information with you, and you can share that.
Anyone else have comments on that from the pediatrics side?
I just have the comments that I already made. Very easy. Work that into our system. I think it would add to a lot of our well job.
All right, I'm going to turn it back to the panel. A couple of you said you might have questions for each other. If they've surfaced for you, by all means, this is your chance. And if not, we're going to wrap up in just a few minutes.
I have a question about stuff. So which one find that parents are more
So based upon my practice, a lot of times I have families that are coming in and pretty significant levels of stress already. And so what I really do is I individualize. I can't say that there's one. I look at that and I kind of go through it and I try to figure out, like I said, what's the low-lying fruit for that family, which is the one that's going to be the easiest one for them to feel successful. And then I work with that. And then if there's one that I'm he's not going to be the stress buster for this family. Maybe you have family members who are working graveyard shifts, and the child is waiting up till the mom's leaving and things like that. This is not the easy battle in this family, but it is easy to get food that's healthy and nutritious, and that's working out great. Start with that one.
Then I would imagine you let them choose.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to ask what the nature. Do we have that information? Anything about the upcoming SLO, Nature RX
Come to my table afterwards.
The work in progress, and if anyone is interested in being part of shaping this program in our community, as Millie said, go find her or contact her, Tanner. I wanted to offer one nuanced disclaimer around the question around connection and communication between early childhood educators, pediatric providers. Obviously, HIPAA is of concern, and privacy is paramount for parents. There may be ways, there should be ways for us to, with that in mind, work on better communication. Okay, I think we've run out of time. I'm feeling Chris onto my left. We're good for time. Are there any final questions for our panelists? For a round of applause, and I call it my colleague Penny Borns. Okay, thank you all. Excited to pass the mic to my friend and colleague and 1/9 of my boss, Dr. Penny Bornstein. She also doubles as a first 5 commissioner. Please raise your hand if you are also a commissioner. I see several of you in the audience. Dr. Brescia, Dr. Tedford, Melinda Sokolowski, Dawn Ortiz-Legg was here before. Thank you so much for the support that you gave. Have dinner together.
Well, thank you so much, Wendy. I just wanted to say I was, at first when I walked in the room, the public health physician and me, the COVID person said, oh my God, what are you doing? But I also was overjoyed by the relationship building that I could see going on in the corridor. We really are lucky in this county to have as many organizations and emphasis placed on this issue as we have, as you've heard tonight from our esteemed panelists. Thank you, Dr. Szilagyi, for recognizing that, the uniqueness of our community. So what I just want from all of you, but in addition to filling out your little blue slips, don't forget that, is that we take away from tonight some intentionality of purpose. And not just, yeah, that was really interesting, but really thinking jobs, as I know most of you are engaged in this work on a day-to-day basis. How can we build our systems? We have one good example of that, and I'm sure First 5, and I, as a commissioner, will bring it back to our First 5 staff. To how can we actually formalize the communication between early education and pediatrics community? I think that's just one hard example, but there are other examples that I'm sure that tweaked your brains as we were talking tonight about how we can actually not just sort of meander our way through the system. If you're finding yourself meandering, Help Me Grow is a good place to go. If you don't know what's in the box, it's a good place to start. Parent Connection is another good place to start. All these organizations, so there's no wrong door, but if you really need some solid help with finding your way to the right resource, Help Me Grow is meant to be that resource. But in addition to really think about how we can build systems and do more than a once a year come together and say, oh yeah, these are all the different ways and places in which I can get help for my families. But to try to really formalize some of the dialogue that you've heard tonight. So think about that as you go on in the coming days. With that, I'm not going to use all of my 15 minutes. I'm sure you're overjoyed. A little bit of break. I just want to thank you all for coming. I have so many familiar faces and so many new ones. So thank you for being part of this wondrous community that really puts its heart in the early child sphere and mental health sphere for early children. And now we need to keep legislating to get money to follow. I would the applause person.